Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going over a brand new poll out of the state of Texas where it involves the 2026 U.S. Senate race that is happening in the state. And in this new poll, jumping right into it, shows incumbent U.S. Senator John Cornyn, who is facing a primary challenge from the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, and the new poll shows who is leading in that respective primary. Now, John Cornyn does have the endorsement already of Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Senate National Republican Senatorial Committee Tim Scott of South Carolina, as well as Rick Scott and Bill Hagerty. Paxton has the endorsement of two United States representatives, State Representative and singer John Rich. But, however, in a recent poll from Brad Parscale, a Republican-aligned pollster, shows Ken Paxton leading over Cornyn 50% to 33%, with 17% undecided. Now, it is worth noting, of course, that this is a Republican-aligned pollster. Even though it's a Republican primary, it doesn't really matter too much, but I still just wanted to acknowledge that. The sample size being 605 voters is not the largest sample size, but still it's very significant. This plays into the overall conversation of Paxton versus Cornyn, which typically primary challenging an incumbent U.S. Senator is usually very rare. But it shows that Cornyn so far has yet to lead in one poll for the Republican primary. So much so, the highest Cornyn has had in any poll was 34% in a poll back in January from Victory Insights. The lowest support Paxton has had so far in one of these polls is 38%. So the worst Paxton has done is still better than the highest numbers Cornyn has done. It doesn't mean 100% that Paxton's going to win and Cornyn's going to lose, but when every poll is consistently having Paxton ahead, it starts to get into the criteria of, okay, Cornyn could really be in trouble here, and Paxton has the momentum so far. This race, even though President Trump has not officially weighed in on this race, he has said that he likes both of the people running in this race, so maybe Trump will endorse, maybe he won't, maybe he'll endorse both of them, but it's clearly going to become a race of who can be more loyal to President Trump. Ken Paxton started his campaign by calling John Cornyn a rhino and saying he is not supportive of President Trump enough. That's the lane Paxton's taking. Cornyn's taking the lane of he supports President Trump and he's helping President Trump in the Senate, and that Paxton, basically all of his own scandals, makes him unfit to be senator. How this is going to play out is going to remain to be seen, but so far it shows with this poll that the momentum is clearly on Ken Paxton's side to win the Republican primary. The only thing I will say is John Cornyn has been a long-time incumbent of the state of Texas, and there's a reason why incumbents are very hard to defeat. So even though Paxton's leading in the polls, I wouldn't officially count John Cornyn out until the primary actually happens and all the votes have been counted, because incumbents are very tough to defeat. But if the election were to be held today, it seems like Ken Paxton certainly has the advantage. The question will be, can Paxton be able to get all the support he says? Can he get above that 50% number? Because if Paxton gets under 50%, the fact that Cornyn is the incumbent could mean that might be enough support with all the undecided vote for Cornyn to break away in the end and win. But right now, I would say it seems Ken Paxton's favored. And as interesting as this poll is that shows Paxton leading Cornyn, it's not even the most interesting part of the poll. The most interesting part of the poll showed Democratic candidate from 2024, Colin Allred, who has also publicly expressed interest in maybe running for 2026 as well, showed when it's Ken Paxton versus Colin Allred, again, in this Republican-aligned poll, Colin Allred's leading over Ken Paxton by a very significant margin, 52% to 37%, with 11% of the vote undecided. Now, there's a few ways we could take this. One is we could totally count it out and say this poll is garbage and Colin Allred would not defeat Ken Paxton. The other way we could take it is by saying we way overreact to this poll and say, that's it, Ken Paxton will lose by 20 points to Colin Allred and it's over. I think the more sensible way to take this is to say, look, I don't know if the Democrats are going to win in 2026 in Texas. I doubt that they will. But at very least, it confirms the theory that Ken Paxton may be the weaker of the two candidates between Cornyn and Paxton in the general election. The predictions right now from Inside Elections and Cook Political Report have Texas still listed as solid Republican. Sabado Crystal Ball has it as likely Republican. Race to the White House has it as lean Republican. Recently, I've had the state of Texas listed at likely Republican at the Senate level, which means I expect the Republicans to win by more than 5 points, but under 15 points. However, I was looking back at the presidential history in the state of Texas and the Senate history, and despite Texas being what it's known to be as a Republican state, it might not be as Republican as you may think. In 2024, Donald Trump beat Kamala Harris here by 13.7%. Certainly a very large victory, but it is still a likely Republican win. Back in 2020, Trump only won it by 5.6 against Joe Biden. That's also barely likely Republican. 2016, Trump won it by 9 points over Hillary Clinton. Again, likely Republican. 2012, Romney won it by 15.8. 08, McCain won it by 11.8. 2004, Bush being from the state won it by 23. In 2000 by 21.3. And then back in 1996, Bob Dole won it by 4.9. So Texas has only been above 15% in three of the last 6 presidential elections or so. Otherwise, it's been a likely Republican state, which means at very least Republicans are certainly favored to win Texas in future presidential races, but it's not going to be like on the same level of like Wyoming or Idaho or the Dakotas in terms of being a safe Republican state. At the Senate level, things are a little bit more concerning for the Republicans. Ted Cruz won in 2024 by 8.5% against Colin Allred, again on the same ballot when Trump won it by 13.5%. Back in 2020, John Cornyn won by 9.6% against his Democratic opponent Hagar, and also 9.6% likely Republican, not safe Republican margin. Back in 2018, this is when things were really shooken up in Texas. Ted Cruz only beat Beto O'Rourke by 2.6% in 2018, which did end up being a very good night for the Democrats. 2026 is supposed to be a very good night for the Democrats as well, the first one we've seen since 2018. So maybe Democratic turnout again boosts the Democrats' chances. We'll have to see. 2014, the very good night for the Republicans. Cornyn won by 27 points. 2012, we saw Ted Cruz win against his Democratic opponent by 15.8%. This is the first election Cruz won. Going back to 2008, John Cornyn won by 12 points. In 2006, the Republican before Cruz Hutchinson won by 25.6. And then in 2002, Cornyn won, I believe, for the first time by 12%. So Texas is very interesting because it's not a safe Republican state that you might think it is, but it has some potential to be either a likely Republican state and even instances of maybe being a lean Republican state. This poll shows, at very least, you could way overreact and say that sells it. The Republicans are going to lose Texas in 2026 if Ken Paxton wins. I'm not going to say that, but I am going to say, at very least, the Republicans probably hurt their chances at winning Texas in 2026 if Ken Paxton is the Republican nominee. Again, I don't want to overreact because we're in May of 2025, but if Paxton were to win the primary, Texas being decided by under 5 points, where Ken Paxton only beats Colin Allred by under 5%, I think is certainly possible. I don't think it would fall under 1%. I don't think it would get that close, but Texas being under 5 points with Paxton, especially if the Democratic enthusiasm and voter turnout is high and Paxton's scandals are very unpopular in the state of Texas, and it hurts the Republicans, it's possible Texas could become competitive in 2026. And that, again, plays into the overall conversation of the strategy element for the Democrats, which is if Republicans have to play defense in Texas, and then if Sherrod Brown runs in Ohio and Republicans have to play defense in Ohio, this gives Democrats more opportunity to go on the attack in Michigan, in Maine, in North Carolina, and Georgia, where even if they don't win in Texas or Ohio, it gives the Democrats more of an opening for spending money and resources in the other 4 battleground Senate seats, where the Democrats could conceivably win all 4, and then the Republicans would only have a 51-49 lead in the U.S. Senate, which puts the Democrats in a good position for 2028 to maybe flip the Senate, in what otherwise was looking like maybe that wouldn't be the case. So it's always done, it's not just done in a vacuum, where this poll that shows Texas could be competitive, it doesn't just affect the Texas Senate race. It could also affect all of the Senate races in the Senate map for 2026 for the Republicans. Obviously, we're going to have to wait for more polls to come out of the state for Paxton versus Allred or Paxton versus other Democrats. But at very least, this should give the Republicans a little bit of pause and say, okay, is this a one-off poll, or is this something we're going to have to keep an eye out for that could become a problem later down the road? I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a like. Make sure to leave a comment below telling me your thoughts. Also, make sure to click subscribe, as I post at least 2 new videos every day that you're not going to want to miss. Thank you so much for watching again, and I hope to see you in a future video.